Hey sixth graders, welcome to your very first video lesson of the school year. So this is a video lesson for lesson 1, day 1. So you should be in your math book on page 2. So take a second to get there. Now, as you do the video lesson, I'm going to be giving directions for you to pause the video, restart it, to do things. Please follow those directions. Also, you can use a calculator in this lesson. All right, so let's get started. We are starting with lesson 1, and it is on ratios. So here's what we're going to do on page 2. Page 2 was about using what you already know about fractions, what you learned in 5th grade, to answer some questions about something called ratios. So we'll start by reading it, then I'm going to give you a job. So it says, you already know that a fraction is a way to compare a part to a whole. Take a look at this problem. Carlos has 4 tennis balls and 5 baseballs. And it says, how can you compare the number of each type of ball to the total number of balls? And how can you compare the number of one type to the number of the other type? So there are 2 questions we're going to explore here. So here is your first job. You see problems A through E here. Your first job is going to be to pause the video and write your answer to A through E. Now, don't worry if you don't know the answer to a specific question. It is okay. So if you don't, give it your best shot. Also, if you get it wrong, when you restart the video, you're going to go over it. You just correct it and you write the new answer. The only thing in part E, when you're in problem E, make sure your answer is a complete sentence. All right. So pause the video. Do A through E now on your own, and as soon as you're done with A through E, restart the video. Go. All right, so you should have A through E done on your own, and as I go over the answers here, I want you to give yourself a C, just like this, if you had it correct. If you had it wrong, then I want you to just mark it with an X, just like that. Sound good? All right, so the first one says, in A, what fraction of the balls are tennis balls? So when you look up at all the balls, you see that 4 are tennis balls. And in a fraction, the second number, the denominator, is always the total, and there are 9 total balls. So the fraction should be 4/9. In B, it says, what fraction of the balls are baseballs? So for B, there are 5 baseballs out of 9 total balls still. So you should have 5/9 for B. By the way, you can pause the video if you need time to correct anything as well, and then just restart it. In C, here's what it says. It says you can also compare 2 quantities with words. You can write the numerical comparison of 4 tennis balls to 9 total balls as simply 4 to 9. Write a comparison of the number of baseballs to the number of total balls using the word to. All right, so in this one, we're talking about baseballs to the number of total balls. So remember, there are 5 baseballs up above. So there are 5 baseballs, and it said to use the word to. And the second part is the number of total balls, which there are 9 total balls. So notice this looks a lot like this fraction here. But this is actually called the ratio, and we pronounce it as 5 to 9. All right, so you might not have had that one, and that's okay. Just erase it and fix it. In D, it says you can also use a colon. So the colon are the 2 dots, one above the other, to separate quantities when you compare numbers. Use this notation to compare the number of each type of ball to the total. So my question is, did you do it for each type of ball? So I know I'm doing for each type of ball to the total. So I know there are 4 tennis balls to 9 total balls. Notice I use the colon. And for the baseballs, there are 5 baseballs to 9 total balls. So that should be my answers for D. So if you missed one of those, if you didn't do each type, just make sure you fix it. All right, and last it says E. How does each of these notations, 4 to 9 where it looks like a fraction, 4 to 9 using the word to, and 4 to 9 using a colon, compare the number of tennis balls to the total number of balls? So in each one, remember, your answer does not have to be exactly word for word what I have here. So we're just looking for your idea. So don't worry so much if your answer doesn't match up. Now, but here's what you should basically say. So for each of those answers, the first number is the number of tennis balls. The second number is the total number of balls. Now, what I'll be looking for in your answer is that you just said something that your 4 should be something about the number of tennis balls and the 9 should be something about the total balls. So remember, you could take a second to pause it and correct any answers that you may have had wrong. But we are about to go on to the next page, page 3. So on page 3, we're going to read a little bit here, and we're going to talk a lot more about it. So this is to tell you more about what ratios are. So first thing, let's look here. It says, a ratio is a way to compare two different quantities. And it says in the first part, sometimes you compare the two parts. So you can have a ratio where you're comparing the 4 tennis balls to the 5 baseballs, or the reverse, the 5 baseballs to the 4 tennis balls. By the way, this is called a part-to-part ratio. Okay, now the other type, let me erase that to clean it up a little bit, says sometimes you compare the part and the whole amount. So this is what we did on the page before. We compared 4 tennis balls to the 9 total balls, and we compared the 5 baseballs to the 9 total balls. So this is called a part-to-whole ratio. And this is really like a fraction. So the one in red, the part-to-part, is a little bit different from a fraction. So now we're going to go down and continue. This is important because this is where you're going to know how to write and say a ratio. So it says, to write a ratio, you can use the word to, a colon, or a fraction bar. The expressions 4 to 5, 4 to 5, and 4 to 5 all represent the ratio of 4 compared to 5. All right, so you see the 3 different ways to write a ratio, and all 3 of them you pronounce the same way, 4 to 5. So going down here, this is what I talked a little bit about above. We have a part-to-part ratio where you're comparing the tennis ball part to the baseball part, or the baseball part to the tennis ball part. So 4 to 5 or 5 to 4. Part to whole. The tennis balls are the part, the total balls are the whole amount. The baseballs can also be a part to the total 9 balls. And then a whole to part would be comparing the total first, if you put the 9 first, to tennis balls or to the baseballs. All right, so there are 3 different types of ratios. Now, this next part says you can also use the phrase for each and for every to describe ratios. For example, 4 tennis balls for every 5 baseballs. 4 tennis balls for each set of 5 baseballs. So that's just another way to say ratios, but you don't have to stress over that too much. All right, so now, the reflect question. Let's read it because then you're going to pause it and you're going to fill in the blanks. So it says, suppose Carlos was given a basketball. Now, don't forget, Carlos had 4 tennis balls. He had 5 baseballs. And now he's given 1 basketball. So I'm going to write that down there. So now the question says, what is the ratio of tennis balls to baseballs? So I'm going to circle that. Tennis balls to baseballs. So that's going to go on this line. Next one says, what is the ratio of total balls to tennis balls? That's going to go on this line. And then last, it says, compare the ratios before Carlos got the basketball and after he got the basketball. How did the basketball affect the ratios? So what I'm looking for here is just one or two sentences telling me how adding the basketball affected the ratios. All right, so here's what I want you to do. Just pause the video. Take a minute or so to answer question 1. Restart it when you're done. Go. All right, so now I'm going to go over number 1. Remember, you should have already paused it and completed it on your own. So let's start with the first part. It says, what is the ratio of tennis balls to baseballs? So remember, Carlos added a basketball here. But this wants to know the ratio of tennis balls to baseballs. So there are still 4 tennis balls, and there are still 5 baseballs. So that ratio could be 4 to 5. Now you can write it with the 2, you can write it with the colon, or you can write it like a fraction. It does not matter which one of those ways you wrote it. But here is what does matter. Do you see how the word tennis ball was first and baseballs was second? You must have the 4 first because tennis balls is first, and the 5 second because baseballs was second. You have to follow the order of the sentence. All right, so then we have the next one. It says, what is the ratio of total balls to tennis balls? Now, since total balls is first, that has to be the first number. Now remember, we have the 4 tennis balls plus the 5 baseballs, but now we have to add the 1 basketball. So now we have 10 total balls. And to tennis balls, well, there are 4 tennis balls. So that ratio of total to tennis balls is 10 to 4. Now it says compare the ratios before Carlos got the basketball and after he got it. How did the basketball affect the ratios? Well, notice in this one, the first ratio, did the basketball actually affect the ratio? No, it didn't, because we're still just talking about the tennis balls and the baseballs. But in the second ratio, adding the basketball affected the total. It affected that. Instead of the total being 9, the total is now 10. So I'm going to just put that in a sentence or two. I'm going to say, adding the basketball. Remember, you do not need to have the exact words as long as we're looking for this idea. Adding the basketball did not affect the first ratio. However, the total increased by 1 in the second ratio. Which was 10 to 4 instead of 9 to 4. Because remember, before the basketball was added, the total was 9. But after the basketball was added, the total was 10. So that's the main thing we want you to understand, is that the first ratio, 4 to 5, didn't change. Because neither of those numbers had anything to do with the basketball. The second ratio, 10 to 4, did change, because the total went up by 1. So that's what we're looking for in your answer. All right, that is it for this first video lesson. So make sure everything's done and ready to go. Thanks, guys.